Well, it's week 52 of the Madaxeman podcast, for those of you who are counting or capable of counting that high. We've got the full set of people here, but in a nod to the zeitgeist, one of us this week's actually even got COVID. We also then dive deep into a long and slightly repetitive, it must be said, discussion about basic techniques, how to do it cheaply, which is the way as well. We talk about what we painted, we talk about many of the different games we played, and we then have the normal discursive chat around Andy's quiz and Andy's quiz French music. So it's a full week, it's a full set of people. We're back in lockdown world, we're wondering what the next lockdown's going to be, and we're going to sit back and listen to the podcast.
This means war.
Look, it's another week. I believe this is 52. Remarkable. 52? Yep, that sounds about right. So we did 51 last week, so it's probably 52 this week. And last time we even delved into a proper topic of conversation about big battles, and which means we're sort of starting to do the same thing as other podcasts and catching the zeitgeist. And I've got a zeitgeist-tastic set of 7 people here. All along the top of the Zoom.
So new contributors then?
Yeah, new contributors. Yeah, I've been the old lot, tried some new ones, but unfortunately we're back with you. That was an unsuccessful secret podcast midweek. But so we've got the full set. So if I just sort of run along the thing, Peter, you appear to have a new backdrop of an Assyrian Relief. Does this, which isn't some very strange practice in a small bar in a back street. But what have you been up to this week? What's going on in Painting Peter world?
Well, I've moved on to Bavarian, so I've got a bit more time to paint as I'm currently off sick. So I've been delving into the world of Bavarian blue and trying to actually fill them out.
So is that lots of very detailed little checkers of blue and white and BMWs driving around and things like that?
That's only on the flags.
I've bought a flag for that.
Yeah. Right. Oh, okay.
That way lies madness.
Yep.
Yeah. No. It's a nice blue. I got an absolutely fantastic stack of material from Andy explaining about all the colours, what they're all called. So in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be doing my very best Dave special mispronunciation of in a dodgy accent of different battalions of the Bavarians, while explaining that these had gold buttons and these had slightly blue buttons or something.
Right. Okay. Which your painting skills in 15mm will no doubt clearly
They'll
make
all
them
be gold.
identify. They'll all be gold.
They'll all be gold.
All the buttons will be gold.
Be careful, mate. It sounds like you're turning into a Napoleonic wargamer.
I know, it's scary.
Pete, if I can paint Bavarians, you can. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a bug going round.
Yeah.
I give everybody else permission. If Peter starts starting a sentence off when talking about Napoleonic uniforms with "I think you'll find," just give him a slap.
Yeah, that could be the issue, couldn't it? Really, that definitely.
Is that tonight's drinking game?
That could be, yeah. Yeah, when Peter starts telling us something, actually, that he sounds like he knows the history of his army, we all have to take a slug of whatever beer or whiskey or red wine that we're all doing.
That could get dangerous. I'd just get briefed by Andy and Dave beforehand and get you all absolutely trolleyed.
No, that could be true, actually. That could be true. Okay, so is it sort of been a week of preparation then, rather than a week of actually diving in and doing stuff?
Well, it was a week of work, crazy work, and then a bit of a standstill with, being diagnosed with COVID. So this week is more of a painting week.
Yeah.
Funnily enough.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed that you don't end up. Well, obviously the whole illness and death thing clearly, but even coughing over the podcast too much would be great as well.
Yeah, it's got the mute button.
It's got the mute button. That's good then. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just ask to be put in the Clive. If you have to go to hospital, ask to be put in the Clive MacLeod ward. They know all about wargamers there.
Yeah, that could be it. All right. Well, Andy, now that you're, I think you've already made 3 contributions in Peter's bit about his painting. So, do we want to go next with you then, and the rest of us can all interrupt 4 or 5 times as well?
Please do. Yeah, go for it. I'm very happy with that. Yeah.
In fact, you're wearing a Bavarian blue sweater, if I'm not much mistaken.
No, it's a bit darker than. I hate to admit it's more kind of Chelsea colour than Bavaria, but
why did I start going down the Napoleonic uniform colours Pantone reference? dead alley. As soon as I opened my mouth, I thought this, and against Andy as well. What's going to happen then?
Tim, you want to get more Napoleonics? I
just want to get more Napoleonics. So Andy, what have you been painting, and does it match your sweater? Whatever you've been doing this week?
Thracians, and no.
No.
I've been painting some of the leftover Thracians. I've got one pack nearly painted, and I found a pack of Balkan Voynich, so I've undercoated them. We'll be painting them as well.
So if your Thracians are not wearing sweaters, does it mean they're lowland Thracians rather than highland Thracians?
Probably, because they get chilly at night otherwise. They do have cloaks though, so that would keep them nice and warm.
Okay.
And I've done the cloaks different colours. They're all wearing brown. I think I call them Phrygian caps, don't they? They're kind of like
so it's more the summer rather than the winter collection.
Used to wear.
Yeah. Okay. So
is Gregory Porter a Thracian because of the hat he wears? I'm just wondering. Has anyone ever investigated this?
I'm not entirely sure. But it does some. Are they the Romphia Thracians or are they javelin men? A bit of a mix of both.
Well, they seem to come with spears. I might just trim the spears down to make them a bit more javelin-y. But they're not the Rompoya guys.
Okay, that'll be that's an interesting little army, the Thracians. I think it's kind of somewhere on that to-do list of I've got enough Thracians for a sort of contingent of Seleucids and things, but then there's always that temptation to expand those 3 bases into an actual whole army.
Well, actually, I was actually counting today, and including the other bases I've got and the things I've got to paint, I could actually make about 9 or 10 bases of Thracian medium foot.
Okay, that's starting to get
which is enough for a sort of allied, which is enough for an allied contingent in an army. I just need some cavalry of some kind, I suppose.
Well, I guess Johnny generic cavalry possibly. Who knows? That could be all right. So it's just been the Hellenistics then. Any learnings from painting people entirely brown?
No, not really. I've been painting them sort of contrast colours because I get bored of painting everything the same colour.
Right. Okay. But mixing them up. All right. Well, if we've got no learnings from Andy, that's probably time to go to Tamsin.
Absolutely.
And, see what we can learn this week after last week's bombshell about nail polish holders.
Yes. Well, probably not much to learn this week, other than the fact that I actually did finish painting the foot leaders for my infamy project.
That looks like a lot of leaders.
Yeah, it's probably more than an 8. Well, cause you also got standard bearers and musicians in there, so.
And that's a very heavily crewed ballista at the back as well. There's 5 guys on that one, if I can see it somewhere.
Yeah.
That's reassuring actually, because there's always a temptation with ballistas just to stick 2 crew on it, because that's kind of what comes in the packet. But it's a big old base, isn't it, with not much on it, and there's quite a lot of dudes doing stuff there.
Yeah, I went with 5 because that's the crew number that you use for infamy.
Okay.
Need to make up some casualty morale tracking marker bases to use, possibly.
Isn't it like building work? There's basically 2 people doing something and another 3 stood around telling them how to do it.
Yeah, it does look like that, yeah.
The bloke at the front looks like he's...
You need one Roman guy holding a little sign saying stop and go.
Yeah,
fire, no fire.
2 people.
Yeah, should have thought of that when I did the engineers base originally.
Yeah, I've actually got on my painting list to do is a Greek temple. And I was thinking of doing a sort of consider a contractor's logo somewhere on it.
Yeah, Romans ended up a few more leader figures than.
Sorry, there was just a moment there, and this will make no sense on the podcast at all. But you've got a picture of 2 Roman leaders next to each other, and they've kind of got one hand on their hip and one hand waving, and you've got a front and back view, and you were sort of swapping between the 2. And it did kind of look like a little bit of YMCA thing going on there. It's I might have to try and clip this video out. And
it is a rather camp photo. It is a rather camp pose.
It is a rather camp pose. Is that one of the Donington ones with?
Yeah, those are Donington. They're in the artillery and equipment.
Yeah, did the Romans have teapots? Or am I going somewhere?
I really don't know,
I
but
have no idea what that really means. That's probably I probably said something deeply inappropriate there, haven't I? Right. Okay. No, they're looking grand, aren't they? That's super.
Yeah, but Roman leaders, for the officer ones, ended up with more figures because you can represent either auxiliary officers or legion officers.
And are those on? Those are single 15mm figures. Are they based on? Are those MDF rounds, or have you just
20mm MDF rounds? Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't even go with pennies or 2p pieces because there's always that.
No, because I had a load of 20mm bases.
Fine.
MDF. And
20, because aren't 20mm bases actually more than 2 pence each? That's the weird thing.
Yeah, you've got the cost. They do cost a little bit more, but because I'm using
consistency,
sort of magnets on magnetic sheet on the base underneath the base of figures, and then flexometal in the boxes.
A very good recovery there. A very good recovery, Tamsin, to me accidentally pointing out to you that you've spent more than it would be to actually just use money, which is like kind of always a good thing on that one. So no, they look great. They're good. So was that a project that you drew a line under this week, or was there more stuff started?
Well, for Romans and Germans, I think somebody mentioned Lancashire games earlier.
Yeah,
it might have been before we started recording, but Lancashire announced a sort of sale today.
A Black Friday, is it?
Yeah, I don't know if it's Black Friday or pre-Christmas, but I thought, okay, I'll order the extra German and Roman figures I need to make my armies up for ADLG.
Excellent. No, they do some good stuff with really big shields on them as well. I think that once you get them painted up, that's really quite impressive. Okay.
Yeah, so I've done that, and I didn't get onto the copperstone figures, and I decided to take a break from figure painting. I've got a couple of bits of MDF scatter terrain to quickly paint up before I do the copperstones.
Yeah, you can only do it for so long.
This means war.
Well, if we're talking about Lancashire having a sale, I think Mr. Leroy Mayer, that possibly puts over to you, because we've had a little kind of sidebar WhatsApp exchange about the Venexia Ottomans and some of their other stuff that cause they've inherited or ended up with that Venexia range that had disappeared for quite some time and gone to America and come back, and they are actually kind of cheap for what used to be an expensive range, I think. But what other than just putting yourself on mute and tapping away at your keyboard to look at how cheap the sale is on Lancashire Games right now, what have you actually been painting this week before I've just distracted you with a potential entire extra project?
Oops, sorry, as I step away from the Lancashire website.
Yep, indeed.
So I've been plotting evil with the Lancashire website and their sales.
So did you know this sale was coming up, or did you just get wind of it? Or
I was hoping that they would do something around the November. November time. So Lancashire often do a sale, and
I'm just going to crack open another beer here in case there's a sound effect. Sorry.
Sound
good. Yeah.
Wargaming Sound of Happiness beer, always keeping open. So I've just been keeping an eye out on their website and noticed their sale had come up. So, and their prices their prices are quite good. So you think of it's 4 heavy cavalry. It's £3.10 normally, now down to £2.48. So
wow, so that's like 160p a cavalry figure.
Yeah, so you start looking at some of those ranges of, maybe if one day I might want to do it, you think, shiny, like to do that.
Wow.
But from a painting perspective, I've actually taken a break from ADLG and Renaissance figures, which is, I know, a little bit of heresy. And I've been busy painting up a fantasy army for Dragon Rampant.
Okay.
Which does not tee in very nicely with the ostrich and kangaroo eggs. We had a discussion about a few weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
A rampant dragon with some eggs.
No, it could be there. You know, it's a Australian Antipodean dragon or something.
So, what scale are you doing for Dragon Rampant then?
I'm doing it in 28 mil.
Is that the correct answer, Peter?
Well, no, it's like if it was 15, I'd have to get some more figures.
Oh,
I've got 28 mil stuff.
You've got 28 mil. It's the wrong answer. It means you can't buy any more stuff. Fine. Okay. All right.
Yeah. There may have been an eBay accident. Was on eBay late at night, saw an army, put a cheeky bid in, and all of a sudden actually won the auction for an entire army. So
I'm waiting for that to end up in the Oxford English Dictionary. It was an eBay accident.
That should be one of the words of the year, shouldn't it, really? Because they were talking about several words of the year.
Remote.
No, you'll know it from in Australia. They announced some of the new words that have gone into the Australian dictionary, which I know is almost an oxymoron. But it's now acknowledged that ISO and Rona is two new words in our dictionary. So
Rona, you've got the
Rona. Australians really can't use big words. So yeah, I've been an ISO for Rona. It's a real bummer.
Right. It's truth.
I just quite like the concept of having some Assyrian Relief. I want to know how much it costs.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, Adam, you've chipped in. You had a week last week when you weren't going to do any painting at all, but you did like an absolute, boatload of if summations do come in boats. I'm assuming that you've accidentally bought a load of stuff, or you were going to buy a bedside airbrush, weren't you?
No, I wasn't. I was definitely not going to get an airbrush.
Yeah.
But no, all I've done this week is I've carried on with the Assyrians. I haven't finished them. Wasn't doing it too much. But I spent more time putting together 30 of the Dacian infant figures, because it's now getting to the time of the year where I always want the next batch ready and primed up to paint, just in case it gets to the point of I finish one batch and then it rains for 3 weeks. So I'm trying to make sure. So I was prepping the new batch before finishing summations. And
can't you do spraying in any of your extensive range of outbuildings?
Well, I do, but it's still kind of damp, so I just prefer I just prefer it not, the atmosphere not being damp if at all possible. Yeah. And I might be being a bit of a wuss, but yeah, it's sort of like a dry day as opposed to is better than just a day where it's not raining indoors.
And I was amazed this week because my Victrix order did arrive, and I do also have a little booklet. And what you were saying, there's an extensive booklet for painting Second World War German 3-tone camo, which is kind of complicated.
Yeah.
I got Shermans, which are kind of green, and there was the same book, and on the front cover of it, they had a list of paint colours for painting these 10mm Shermans, and there were 23 different paints on it.
Yeah,
and your comedy line from last week about the bedside airbrush is actually bloody true. I thought you'd made that up for comedy purposes.
Last week, that wasn't a pudding I was over-egging. If anything, I was
not at all.
Going with subtlety.
Not at all. 23 bloody paint colours for painting a 10mm Sherman. And I think there's 4 colours of white for doing the whitewash. To do them for winter war.
Painting a 10mm Sherman, I'm going with, we need green.
I'm just waiting for the spray to arrive, and then it's mostly done. That's just absolutely it. Okay. So how have the Dacians been going? Do they click together very well? Is there any good things where you go the mould lines are in the right places or whatever?
There's not very much. There's still quite a new range, so there's not too many mould lines, I don't think. I think it's they're quite clean. The mould lines are quite easy to scrape off. I know you've got into kit bashing different plastic figures and sticking them together. My judgment of these plastic kits, I want them to be a wide variety of interesting poses while being really, really easy to stick together. Because I know that's contradictory, but that's my beautiful thing. They're enough. I found some of them were a little bit of a pain to get the arms to match up and be a bit natural, and they might need a little bit of filler or something, or that might just be.
Yep.
So I found it seemed to take me to stick 30 of them together. It seemed to take an awful long time. But when I say an awful long time, that's a couple of hours probably. But they look good. They're prepped, and I'm sure once they're painted, they will look even better. So they're all sort of like kind of working. And there is lots of poses, and the bowmen, because I'm doing one base of bowmen in that 30, and sort of like each of the bowmen's in different pose. Some are loosing, some are knocking, some are taking a sort of like arrow out of the quiver, either on the back or in the hip. So it's all good.
That's good. Excellent. All right. Okay.
In fact, no, the only thing about them that's kind of interesting is there are 8 bodies on a sprue, and 2 of the bodies are topless. And they go with the bare arms of the double-handed falx thing, which looks good, but it just you can't. There are lots of arms that can't go with lots of bodies because it's a case of, well, he's not wearing a top, but he's got sleeves. That's a bit weird.
It's kind of like a reverse Australian footballer thing going on.
Yeah, now I did go with one where he was wearing a top and sort of like had bare arms, just to sort of like have a little bit, because that wasn't, it's like a tank top. It might be a fashion mistake, but it's not completely impossible.
So actually, are you going to do like an Australian rules football thing, or are you just going to do a kind of 1940s British tank top with brown horizontal stripes and things like that?
No, I'm going to paint it in a very shade of like light brown or.
Right, it'll just be brown. Yeah.
Yeah, just so you can't really notice it, to be honest. And I'm certainly not going to go with the Aussie rules football thing.
Not with the Aussie. Is there a budget-based team?
The topless ones. Have you seen the Australian, I presume they use them in English, rugby league? They wear like skin tight.
Yes, that's true, actually, yeah.
I might actually paint the topless ones.
Yeah.
As football league.
Saying there was, 3rd century BC Lycra, because actually wasn't Lycra one of the client kingdoms of Rome in the in that particular part of the Mediterranean? The king of Lycra, or possibly.
Yes.
That's a whole nother.
That was Rome's expanding empire.
Yes. Oh my God! It's week 52, and he's come up with a good one. Oh, that's fantastic! Oh my Lord, amazing.
Stop! I'm just getting a pen to write this one down. Rome's expanding empire. It as well.
I saw a really good T-shirt the other day on Facebook, which was it's actually a guy called
Andy, you've had a win. You sure you want to go on with this?
No, yeah, I really like this one. It was a T-shirt that said, "I believe in the right to arm bears."
Quit while you're ahead, mate.
Yeah. I think that's another opportunity for that sound effect. Right, okay. Dave, you've suddenly jumped into centre screen, and you're there with your kind of pseudo American football numbers on your shirt, and you've got your microscope there or whatever it is, your magnifying glass, your painting stuff. Tell us what's on the Dave desk this week.
The usual nonsense of Württemberg infantry, the last regiment. I'm just deciding which of the 3 flags I'm going to use and which one. Will it be Prinz Paul, Kronprinz, or von Camera?
I'd go with the regiment you can pronounce.
Yeah,
might be an idea.
Yellow flag rather than the blue flags.
Okay, so just
a pink one, and we've got a blue one already. So I think a yellow one's what's going to have to go. So then I've got to investigate the collars and cuffs for them.
Well, make sure they match.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Yeah, that's what the magnifying glass is for. Yeah,
I've got a bit bored of painting all that, so I've been rummaging through the boxes of rubbish, and I've got a box of
thanks.
I've got a box of stuff which you got given at salute and at various things. So I stuck together some Deus Vault Fireforge. There's a King Baldwin we were given at Rome, at the Worlds in Rome.
Mike Baldwin?
Yeah, but so
please don't suggest Mike Baldwin's any form of royalty. That would be a deep, deep dark hole to go down.
So I started sticking him together with Testors cement because I'm no good with these 28 millimeter things, and it wasn't until Simon that Clive Flumal pointed out that the Firefall figures are actually resin.
Dave, there's an entire podcast about glue. Where were you? You were part of it. Were you paying no attention?
Well, no, it's painting Egyptians or something.
Yeah, Tim, that was so one lockdown ago.
That was so one lockdown ago, absolutely. Yeah.
I've been sitting here trying to stick a horse together with plastic cement glue, and it's just falling apart. And I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing wrong? Till I found out it was resin. So,
the answer to all questions is use araldite, isn't it?
I don't like araldite. I tried. Well, that's another story.
Baby sham.
Yeah.
I've been painting some Malifaux figures.
You've got some Malifaux figures.
Well, when we went down to Bournemouth, and I came.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wandering around the shop in Toyment in Bournemouth, thinking, "What the hell should I do with another Victory, 15 quid or whatever?" And I bought these Malifaux sewer bases.
Okay, right. So you're building from the ground up.
Put them together, and you probably won't see them because the lights.
Yep. Okay.
So like a little brick wall with some pipes and some tentacles coming out of them.
Right. Excellent.
Have you got anything to actually put on the base?
Yeah, no, it's a base with a wall and some pipes, and then out of the pipes are coming some sort of alien tentacle thing.
Okay, so you've done a base, which for this week, to be fair, is like
pretty on point, isn't it? Yeah, that's pretty on point.
And
but no figure on top of it.
So I'm sort of between projects. So I've been thinking, go through this bag of salutes plastics and sort of stick some of them together and have a bit of fun with that. But the main thing is, I've decided I've got a new project for the winter is going to be some sort of African army. Probably Beja or Christian Nubian. So I remembered that Paul Johnson did a really pretty army for that.
He did, yeah, really good, really good.
Years ago. So I got hold of him on email this morning, and then he said, "Give me a call on his WhatsApp," and he's in Zanzibar.
As one does, yeah.
And he's our listener from Zanzibar.
There is a listener from Zanzibar. Yes, there is. That's true. On the stats,
he went out there. He was telling me he got a new job.
Yeah, well, he's out there studying Swahili.
Right.
And then it was about an hour discussing which manufacturers make the best figures for various African armies.
Wow, amazing. That's good. So that means that's another entire continent or continent-sized place where I presume ADLG can now claim that it's played as well. We're going back to a very old DBM story, but we won't go there. About different Botswana scandal, the Botswana scandal. Okay, so which manufacturers do make any of those sorts of figures?
Well, I mean, to go back on our silly pricing conversation, the regular Kingdom of Benin figures look quite funky and are really dirt cheap.
Okay, all right.
In any way, Beja or Christian Nubian, but they look like funky figures.
They're quite cheap, yep.
And I think you need, for sort of an African armies, you need 6 bases of impetuous swordsmen, so they could be a bit of a laugh. Maybe some Eureka noble cavalry might have to come in. Not sure yet, still debating.
Yeah, actually, I think I did see one of those armies part painted in whatever the Americans call bring and buy. Tabletop
flea market, they call it, don't they?
Flea market at Cold Wars earlier this year, and I kind of, you sort of cruise around and get tempted by it, and then come back and somebody else had bought it, so I didn't have to ship it back, which was probably a relief. But I think there is a point there on pricing that's kind of interesting that I suspect we should come back to next week.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's been finishing Württembergers, deciding what flags to give them, and then planning the next big project and doing some odds and sods.
Yeah, odds and sods. I think odds and sods is the next thing, just to prevent the boredom. Just do some. I've got some Space Marine type things which I found which we were all given at warfare as given at salute a few years ago. So they might be a bit funny.
They might get done as well. Good. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, I think from my point of view, again, it's been an odds and sods week as well. It's one of those. I think I threw some photos on the website earlier, but so I've had a load of 6mm tanks that I painted about another 20 of, some 1-ton Land Rovers, some Chieftains, some Butler's plastic models, T55s, which, you know, a T55 is about as throwaway a tank as you want. It's almost kind of what a small child would draw a tank. So, you know, they're not hyper fantastic models, but adding 10 T55s to a force that's going to throw itself at the enemy is fine. I've started painting those couple of Trent miniatures, Ottoman commanders up there somewhere, whatever, in 28mm, which are generals for an Ottoman army that I don't really own properly in 15mm. I've had a bash at, I sort of got stuck with the 28mm Arabs because I just had 60 or 70 infantry, spearmen and stuff to do, and it was just too many to finish off because they were all quite close to being done. I'd done all the main colours and things, but it was just a bit of faffing around. So I almost needed to do something else, and I rebased a few different bits and pieces. I used a bit more biostrip on some really, you know, I think one of the world's most boring 15mm figures must be the Essex 15mm Arab spearman with the round shield with the kind of the studs on it. And they're just like, and I actually did some biostrip on some of those to try and paint some of them up in colours because all mine are in deserty beiges. So there's a bit of biostrip on that. I rebased a few of my 15mm Numidians to kind of get, because I just suddenly thought, actually, I've got the wrong mix of troops for that. And then having done all these other distraction projects, I suddenly found myself going back to the other Arabs and going, I've messed around and done diddly squat really this week of anything I want. Why don't I just stick all these things on a base and just tidy up the bits that I need to do later when they're based rather than looking at them all on base. So suddenly these Arab spearmen have gone from, oh, I don't want to finish them, to, oh, I've nearly finished them and I don't need to do much to actually finish them, and I've sort of got to do it now. So
this means war.
My Victrix order with the mythical 10mm Shermans arrived, which is just, it's, again, I think it probably does mean, I think we do need to have a conversation about why we don't want to pay proper money for good stuff. Maybe it's a proper conversation next week, because these Victrix Shermans, as you said, Adam, they're really, really well detailed, but they are still 10mm tanks. And at 22 quid for 6, that's like £3.70 each. And are they better than pit head tanks at £2.70? Are they a third, 40? It's really made me focus about trying to get my head around what my own thought process is on that.
Yeah, and I think the first thing is define better. Now,
yeah.
For a technical exercise of a casted tank at 144, yeah, they are technically better and there's more detail. But for me, that's not necessarily the most winningest thing I need in a technical tank. So there's a conversation in the head then about what, because I'm looking for a robust war games figure.
Yeah.
And details, I want it to look right and enough detail to look like a tank good, but...
And I think, you know, this one, there's a machine gun that sort of sits behind the commander's cupola, you know, the hatch or whatever it's called, and it sort of sticks on. And the odd thing is, on the metal ones, it's a metal thing. It kind of goes into a hole in the tank. It's metal and metal. It's bigger and lumpier than it should be, but it's bloody metal. Whereas this is a cast to scale plastic glued on a, the thickness of a needle, mounting onto another bit of plastic, and you're going, this, I'm going to break this. Whereas if it's metal, I'm not sure I am. It's kind of, I'm absolutely in two minds about whether this is a great thing or not. And particularly coming a couple of weeks after I got those metal Hanamags from the guy at Red 3 that are kind of exactly what I want for 10mm tanks. They're clean, they're nice castings. Then I've been looking at some of the pre-printed, print to order stuff online to think, particularly for tanks. And Adam, you must have done this as well with them. You can have the APCs, but they do cost money, cost points, and you end up wanting a load of cheap trucks to ferry your infantry around the battlefield, so you can spend more points on tanks, really, don't you? But then you're going, why am I paying proper money for trucks that are going to move twice and be taken off?
Which I have done.
Which they're just markers.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, should I just get some resin trucks, because that would be kind of a good compromise? And then you look at them, you go, some of them at 10mm have got real printing lines, I guess, on them. So there's all sorts of weird things. But I think there's a whole other conversation that we should probably have next week about why and what is good value, and why do we bang on about it and get so tied up about it as wargamers, particularly ancient wargamers or historical wargamers, because I don't think it's such a thing in the GW world or the some other parts of it. I don't think it's a thing in the board games world. People pay proper money for stuff.
If you look at the price of Games Workshop, good value in Games Workshop.
You've already gone. You're out, aren't you, on that thing? But
one figure, £80, or ADLG army, almost just over £80.
I think, to be honest, it's very much an instinctive thing and not rational. And if you really like something, you'll pay the money for it. And
but I think the big question, let's just come back to this next week, is why it's almost we're getting almost into psychology, but why are we not able to make rational decisions? Because we could all look at one thing and go, that's not good value. And we could all look at something else and go, I'd pay any money for that. And both of them are
it goes back figures. To without being boring, economics and the study of it and what you value it compared to someone else values it. That comparison could be vastly different. I mean, there are someone who's not a war gamer about, do they value any of the armies that we have and do?
Yeah, that's probably a whole other thing. But I do think there is something specific in historical war gamers about this as well. And I remember having a conversation with a couple of guys who run a big board game show and talking to them about historical war gamers. And they said, look, at the end of the day, historical war gamers as a group are just tight. And if you think of the people who, when the BHGS moved one of their competitions to UK Games Expo at the NEC, there were whole groups of, it was almost bizarre. It was kind of rule set specific. And some rule sets were going, no, this is too expensive. I don't like paying for the parking, whatever. And other rule sets were going, this is all right. It's fine. I quite like it. And clearly there's different things and different costs and all the rest of it. But there's just something weird there. But look, let's unpick that next week, and then let's get on to what sort of gaming have you done this week.
Yeah, but going back to your Shermans and the machine guns,
you're
doing British or American?
They're going to be the same. They're going to be generic.
Oh, right, okay.
Germans. I mean, lots of people argue about this.
The top machine gun for the anti-aircraft, which was for anti-aircraft. I mean, most of the British tanks removed it.
Well, I think mine will be British then, because I think I'll be removing it by accident. My friends will be removing it.
Shermans, and this is the way different types of Shermans go. You've got Sherman 75s and 76s, which are actually the same tank. It just depends on what gun they've got.
Yeah.
You've got the Firefly, who's got a bigger gun, and then you've got the
bigger and a different turret.
And the thing out the back, the box on the back. Yeah.
And then you've got the jumbo, and that's the only type
of the three.
And you've got one of these heroes with the drain pipe stuck over it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Adam. I'll let you know that.
Yeah.
Can I just ask Peter a question? Because his background, is that actually the Ishtar Gate Babylonian lion? Is that a special background you put on? Because that looks like it's sort of like a wall in Peter's towers. Is that part of your house?
It's, we just had it shipped over from Germany. Yeah. We just took it out of the museum there and just decided to attach it to the wall.
Peter's Mansions in South London. It looks beautiful, by the way.
It's fantastic. You should see it with the uplights. If I went and turned the uplights on right now, it'd just be fantastic. Just and if you can see the little notch I'm trying to get just over there, if you press that in, the cocktail bar comes out.
Mr. Bond, you're spoiling us. Right.
So have you got the shark tack behind it then?
This means war.
Well, this week then, let's go around the table and see who's been gaming. So, Andy, you're the king of gaming. I think we all found out this week that you'd spent over 200 hours on Tabletop Simulator so far, which is astonishing and admirable, and a massive commitment to supporting the enforcement of lockdown regulations across the UK. I think the One Show do like lockdown heroes, and maybe we should all nominate you and get Jermaine Genus to turn up at your house and socially distance, give you an award for playing war games for the longest period of time without meeting anybody or something. But what's you must have had played a couple of days solid this week or something to ratchet that up?
No, what did I do this week? I had my usual game against Dave Ray on a Wednesday, and Dave Saunders and I played BE on Sunday night, and of course you guys joined in, and we're learning how to play it and just playing it very slowly to try and wrap our heads around it. I think the hours I clock up on it must be time spent putting the army lists together. Must count that as well. But
and are those hours well spent? Are those hours well spent, or do you still?
Not really. Well, I was going to say that based on the recent games that Dave Ray and I did about the Punic Wars, if my results were replicated historically, Rome would be a tourist attraction on the outskirts of the Carthaginian Empire.
Right. Okay. The Romans have not been doing it good for you then.
No, it's not been going well. We're doing Cynocephali this week, which is the later Macedonians against the Romans. So I'm going to be the later Macedonians.
Okay. Do you actually do you have sort of the setup for these games? You save the setups if you both got? Are they historical lists or are they just broadly?
No, we don't. What we're doing for these games is we just say what year was the battle. Fine. What were the armies that took part, and then just build army lists around that.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So, for example, when we did Cannae, we did the Hannibal in Italy version of the Carthaginians.
Okay.
So
that's pretty light touch, a lot
that's
of flexibility in it.
That's the only degree of authenticity that we got with it. But the battle could have taken place in any kind of terrain based on what was rolled up and who got the initiative.
Okay. All right. And then the Battle Empire game, which I kind of joined in on the end of it, I think there was quite an enlightening debate on that. And Dave, you can probably chip in as well, in which I think Dave was trying to work out if the rules were broken, and you were pointing out to him that advancing in column down a road over a bridge towards a massed artillery battery of Russians would have been pretty bad idea in any sort of rules. Dave, have you internalised that yet? Have you internalised that challenge?
I get it completely, but I think once you've got an impassable river with two fords and a bridge, the game's pretty weird.
Yeah,
I just thought it was fantastic to see the ricochets almost taking out your generals twice.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, ricochets of the bouncing ball going through a column of infantry and then hitting into the people behind it. It was really quite frightening. But,
what you sort of seem to overlook is that it's not just one cannonball. It's a whole swathe of the front of a battery, which with the Russian battery you're looking probably like 120 meters wide of scattered guns. So there's quite a swathe.
Was that terrain that some of you actually chose? I can't imagine it was just
no.
It's what came up in the die rolls.
It's kind of compulsory in Eastern. We were playing in Eastern Europe because Andy was using the Russians. And when
there's a possibility of you having a river across the front of your own deployment area that has only got 2 fords.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
All the terrain has to go on your side. If you whatever you get on the table goes in your side of the table. So if you get a river, you then dice for whereabouts the river starts and finishes, and it seems to be quite often it comes on in a sort of U shape.
Right.
There was look. Fair go to Dave. There was 3 fords. He only chose to use the 2 that were facing straight at the cannons.
Fine, that was it.
Yeah.
And was it a mandatory to have the river running pretty much along the outside edge of your deployment area?
Essentially, yes. But also the river rolled up as a fast-flowing, wide river. And, if it was a little stream, you wouldn't have had that problem because the guys could have just waded across anywhere and then it wouldn't have been such a terrain obstacle.
I think it's like Aspen Essling, which is like where, I'm sure we all know, Napoleon was trying to get across a river and the Austrians were floating pontoons full of bricks down the river.
Yeah. I think is that episode number 17 of the Lockdown 20, possibly?
Exactly. Yeah.
Something like
could
that.
Well be. Yeah, could well be. Asperg Essling.
What my army's supposed to represent, so that was fun.
Okay.
I think BE is quite a complicated set of rules. It's good. There's a lot going on in there.
There's a lot of traffic management, isn't there? It's bizarre. That's one of the skills is traffic management, which I think is your phrase, Andy.
Also, you need to go in mob-handed. It's not like ADLG where a better unit will beat a lesser quality unit of the enemy. You're more likely to come a cropper unless you go in with superior numbers.
Yeah, you need that 2-to-1, 3-to-1. You need to do the softening up. It is just a dip. Well,
and also for the morale support,
game.
If you're going in with flank and rear support, you're less likely to be driven off before you need to fight people.
Yeah, it's literally a different game, isn't it? Quite literally a different game. Yeah. Okay.
I had some progress with BE this week. I've actually been allowed to go onto the forum. It's only taken 3 weeks for them to do it.
Yeah, I think Hervé might be busy with something else, possibly.
Yeah, I think
fingers crossed, which would be a result, wouldn't it? So what about anything else, Dave, from you? Did you play any other games this week, or were you just still reeling from your BE experience?
No, BE we played sort of twice, didn't we? Simon and I were going to play last week. We were a bit too pissed after the funeral.
Oh, right. No, okay. Yeah, Clive's.
We didn't quite get that.
Right. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Peter, have you now that you're locked in your house with your children who've already gifted you a disease, I believe? Did you manage to take them on any sort of form of gaming?
No, we were doing a bit of computer gaming where we were doing EU4, but not like doing some of the tabletop stuff. So my youngest was.
Do you play them at EU4 or?
Yes, I do, and he beats me, which is quite amusing because he's worked out all the tricks and everything else, and likes turning up mob-handed with his Ottomans.
Oh wow! So he basically beats you as a teenager, whatever would do at computer games, rather than your military genius remains unbowed. It's just him knowing the tricks.
That I'd like to think it that way. Yeah.
Well, it's okay then. Yeah. So we'll have to bring him in at some point and see if he's got a different view on that. I have a suspicion.
I don't doubt he won't, but
you don't doubt he won't. Okay.
Yeah, but hopefully this week he'll be doing a few more BE games, I think.
Yeah. No, good. Right. Okay. All right. Tamsin, what about you? Have you been doing any skirmish gaming or getting anything out on the table this time this week, or has it still all been all painting for you? Oh, not there. Sorry. Adam's gone as well completely. Right. So, I was just doing some bloody painting there. Sorry about that.
There she is.
Tansy, any skirmish games from you this week?
No games for me this week.
Okay. Well, for me this week, I've actually managed to fit in, as well as kind of sitting in on the BE game. Well, I didn't shove any soldiers around. I think I've actually done 2 long-distance tabletop simulator games. One against, one guy, a couple of guys from Australia. One of them's the battle reports guy from Australia as well. He joined in and came to sit it. So it was I actually had to start at 9 o'clock in the morning which is a bit surreal, in order to get the time difference right for them to the other side. So for me, that was actually getting up early and on time. It was quite disturbing, and I did that textbook completely stupid thing of. I say completely stupid, but most of the Western defence industrial complex and its defence establishment does it every day, of fighting the last war, which was quite remarkable. So I was playing a classical game because it's the first time we played, so I always think classical is a good place to start. And I didn't actually get around to pulling together a proper army, so I just reused the Roman army that I'd played Phil with the week before, and tweaked it to make it better, because it had some flaws, because I'd just cobbled that together a little bit. So I improved it, and I was thinking, okay, I'll just wheel this out. It's already won a game. It's been quite effective, bish bosh. And deployed it. The terrain didn't really work. The other people, they were using Carthaginians, and they took off 2 bits of rough that I put down with 2 6s, which was a bit of a pain in the whatever. And it only left 1 piece of rough on one flank for my medium infantry my Sam Knights to rush into. So I stuck the Sam Knights there. They were going to rush into the medium infantry. I was going to, put my big spear and legionaries in the middle and tough it out. And then my big cavalry command on the open flank with a couple of spearmen and try and do the same thing. And I'd not been paying attention, and they were using early Carthaginians. So, so my medium infantry suddenly found themselves in the open, moving second against 4 heavy chariots. So they were sort of on the back foot from pretty much the first turn. And I think the best I managed to achieve with them was having the last of them killed on my base edge in about turn 4.
So they were basically speed bumps.
They were speed bumps, and the speed bit was they were running backwards at full speed, trying to just delay death, which completely opened the flank of my spear line, which didn't work. And then my cavalry command and its spearmen were just slowly chasing his cavalry command, which was falling back because he was just winning in the middle. And it was just everything. I didn't pay attention on the list. The terrain went against me, and I deployed and fought as if the terrain was still there, and it was just an absolute shambles. I've got a video of it, but I'm not even sure it's actually worth salvaging, because there's so little there, and it was over quite quickly. And then this afternoon I've just played Massimo, who's the guy who's conjured up many of the armies in Arctic Air on Tabletop Simulator, in a great high medieval battle. I used late Hungarians and he used Germans. And there was a big medium foot motorway sort of straight down the middle, a hill and some rough terrain that I couldn't really do a lot about. And he threw a load of Swiss halberdiers down it in an allied command. One flank, he had all his heavy infantry, pikemen, halberdiers, and I just sort of skirmished that away with cavalry. The other flank, he had his knights, and I had my knights and a command with some sort of infantry and a war wagon and the rest of it. And it was a real nip and tuck. I was a long way ahead for a while, and then nearly pushed him over the line, and then he really, really clawed it back. And we ended up, his 21 element army broke, and my 22 element army had 21 gone. So it was like 42 units casualties on it, or casualty points, which was absolutely fantastic. And I think we'll get another game in the next couple of weeks, probably something a bit more early and classical. But going from all classical battles more recently to a heavy metal historical one, and just sort of remembering how terrain works and how mixed arms works in medieval battles was really, really a good kind of reminder that there's just so many bloody different ways to play this. I think absolutely so many different ways. But I think the only thing with the Hungarian army that exists on TTS is it's got some quite bold and sort of intrusive basing, and okay, and there you can sort of change it with a couple of clicks. But I think that does take us very very obviously. It's almost as if I haven't just made that stuff up to make a link and a bridge to the next feature. To talk a little bit about different types of basing.
This means war.
Right, well, this is something that we've been threatening to talk about for months, possibly even since we started. It's been on our list of unimportant, weird things. But I think, after the massive excitement of paintbrushes and then topping that with a whole 35 to 38 minutes about talking about glue, we seem to have managed to kick this one into the long grass for the best part of 6 months. But with lockdown grinding on and being kind of weirdly half sort of extended today, as there always seems to be a press conference at all times, it has eventually become the time to talk about basing and how we do it, what we do, what the theory is, what the thinking is. And this is if we want to start high and start about this intellectually and talk about the ins and outs of it, I think there's only one place to start, and that is Tamsin, because you have clearly thought about this, and the rest of us probably just do stuff and cobble it together and don't think about it. But you're going to, I'm hoping, lay some theory, some structure, some concepts onto it, some stuff that you've read from somewhere else. What's your world? What's your basing thing? How does that all fit together?
It depends.
Correct answer.
Materials over the years, so it's always try to get the bases done so they look appropriate for the context of the figures they're going to be in.
You don't have a basing style, then. You look at the figures. You look at. Do you look at the scale? Do you look at the? Because obviously,
it's a mix. It's the scale of figures, the context, so what period, what geographical area. Yeah. Also, are they individually based, multiple based?
Okay. So I guess the context is a straightforward one for us all to understand. We're not going to see the Romans in Megacity 1, although I'm sure someone's planned a game for Salute 2023 for that.
Given the fact that there's a lot of various time travel bits going on.
Possible, isn't it? Yeah, it will be at Salute 2023. Now we've mentioned it.
You could well see.
Yeah, but you made an interesting suggestion about scale. So if you're saying 15s and 28s, then generally, even if they were the same era, say you were doing. I think we've seen you do some Romans or something, or and 15s and 28s. What's your thinking about doing them differently, or how would you approach them differently from basing material, basing style? What is there a difference?
So I've read to some extent. If you're using sand and other sort of granular bits, it depends on the grain size. Something that looks fine for sort of dry mud, sand or whatever in 28mm would look ridiculously large for 15mm and ludicrously large for 6mm. So it's getting that done.
Sorry, I've just got to put you on pause while I go and burn all my basing from my different scale checks. No, we'll come back to it. Yes, go on, carry on.
Yeah, so different grades of sand for mixed into however you're going to do it. So 6mm or even 15mm, I tend to use sort of finer grain sand than I do for wood at 28mm. Do
you buy sand from basing companies, or do you just buy sand from builders?
I'm trying to remember what I did.
The first army I did, the basing sand I got was I nicked it out of the children's sand pit.
Yeah.
By comparison.
Yeah.
Cool. The amounts you're talking about for basing figures, so, largish grain sand. You can buy 1 kilogram bags of bird sand from Wilco for I think it's £1.
Mm.
That'll do you for several
Decade.
28mm armies.
Yep. Yeah. So it's just a grain thing.
And also, I have Wilco bird grit again, kilogram for £1, and
Right. Okay.
use a mix even more up.
So do you have, in the same way that you've got your tiered, arrangement of paints on the nail varnish, do you have a tiered arrangement of different pots of bird grit? There's not an eBay bird grit tiered holder? No, fine.
I just have sort of Tupperware, standard Tupperware.
But how many? How many
bags into Tupperware boxes?
But how many different grades of sand and stuff do you have on the workbench?
I think it's probably 3.
3. Okay. Oh, thank God for that. I was just.
Yeah, it's not 100.
I think it's going to be like 18 or something.
But what I found, but 2 sides of basing. You got the sort of ground material.
Yeah.
Which you're using is build up around any integral bases on the figures.
Mm.
Normally, most figures cast, you've got the
come with a little base, don't they?
Disc or whatever.
Yeah.
Building up around that, and I tend to if it's quite thin, you can get away with just PVA and sand. If it's thicker, then you need to build up a bit. And I've tried various materials over the years. I sort of acrylic modelling paste, which still do sometimes.
That costs money though, doesn't it? That's like that's like an expensive thing, isn't it?
Cheap and cheerful now.
Mm.
Pound shops, go and buy. You can get, if you go to Poundland, you can get brown acrylic frame sealant.
Frame sealant? Is that it's got a little bit rubbery?
Same sort of thing as decorator's cork.
Okay, decorator's cork. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's still got a little bit of flex in it.
You can go off to B&Q or Screwfix, wherever, and buy sort of slightly more expensive ones, but Poundland do it £1 a tube, 300 mils, and
wow.
But do a lot of bases.
Yeah.
And sometimes just to make things, speed things up, do a bit, empty a tube, empty a tube into a container, add some grit and sand, a little bit of water, mix up. So you've got
the texture all in one. So you believe in doing the texture all in one then?
And you've got the texture.
Okay.
I've done that on a few. I've used Vallejo's acrylic, their acrylic ground textures, earth textures.
Is that just you being, is that you falling for marketing from Vallejo, and actually the decorator's cork is just as good?
Vallejo, I saw it and thought, I'll try that.
Yeah. Okay. So it's an experiment.
I know, really worked out that it was basically same as acrylic modelling paste.
Okay.
You can buy a 300ml tub of acrylic modelling paste for about £8.
Yeah.
Which is the same as decorator's cork.
Decorator's cork with sand added to it. Yeah. Okay. So
the modelling paste is just straight cork.
Oh my God.
You get artist text paste, which is cork plus.
Wow. Wait. So you've very much been of the opinion that cheap is better. Cheap is exactly the same, really, when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Cheap is basing materials. It's good enough. I wouldn't use sort of cheapo craft acrylics for works for painting figures.
No, sure, but for basing, it's as good as.
For basing and for doing terrain, they're absolutely fine. But
just get it done. Okay, all right. And
second stage of basing is what you put on top of that ground texture.
Okay.
You're talking sort of the ground foam flocks, static grass, pre-made.
Now there's a whole world of static grass, isn't there? So are you an electric machine type person when it comes to static grass? Is that
sometimes not always?
What's your criteria for using have you got an electrostatic machine thing?
I've actually got 2.
Of course you've got 2. Right. And
I've
got one which is
a bedside one. There's a bedside one with 2 to 3 bars of pressure.
I've got a flatbed one which I bought. I think it was War Painter.
Okay.
I've a flock box which you can use as flatbed. I put put paper down, sort of hold it down with something, apply spots of glue, and you can make tufts that way. Or you can plug it, or it comes with crocodile clips, which you can attach to sieve or whatever. Have your paper or whatever separate. Grass into the sieve and shake it over. I've used both, but I found some ways that was actually a bit awkward for when you were doing sort of figure bases. Yeah, fine for doing tufts, but not for doing figures.
So doing electrostatic on.
I bought another one from World Scenics.
Right.
The handheld sort of shaker tub looks like a lightsaber gone wrong.
Right. Okay. And is that battery operated?
That's battery operated. The flatbed one can be battery operated or mains operated.
Personally, I would say if you're getting into mains operated flock stuff, you're in a world of danger, really, aren't you? That's it can't need 240 volts and 50 hertz, can it? Really? Otherwise, you're going to be melting the figures, surely. But
no, it goes. Well, it doesn't. It goes through a transformer bit, so it's only like 9 or 12 volts.
Fine. All right. Okay.
It's the amperage. And remember, it's not for voltage that kills you. It's the amperage.
It's the amperage.
Igor, throw the switch.
Throw the switch, Igor. Yes. They
passed
away through.
I do multi-figure bases. Most of the time, I actually do the same as Dave. I use the knock gauge master, whichever it is. The
puffer squirter thing. Bottles. And the difference between using either electrostatic or the puffer squirter bottle and just, which is kind of what I do, is like stick on some white glue and then dunk them in grass stuffs. What is the real difference?
You're more likely, with the puff bottle, you get more of them actually standing upright than you do just dunking them in. And with electrostatic, you get even more standing upright.
Right. Okay.
Then it's the whole bit about the thickness, how thick.
How long is the flock? Yeah, what is the flock length? What's your chosen flock length by figure? Because I think I've got like one lot of.
Mostly I use 2 millimeter flock static grass. For 28mm figures, I might use 4mm as well, or I might do sometimes. I think I might have shown some on one of the earlier
Germans maybe
ones where I had sort of multi-layers. So you go back, apply a base layer, do a then add some extra glue, do a second layer possibly with a different colour, so you get patches different lengths and colours.
Wow.
So how do you stop the flock coming off? Because usually after I've been in a long competition, it looks as though there's sort of it's a crazy dog shedding by the end of the weekend.
You'll always get some shedding with static grass. What you can do afterward to help reduce that is another spray again with varnish.
I always varnish after putting the static grass on, but you've got to wait.
The problem is if you varnish after,
leave it 20 hours. Blast off.
Yeah, you can end up with little green bits stuck out in the nose of the miniature, and that it looks pretty weird. And then you go around, the tweezers trying to pay them up because you always notice it when you put it down and there's bright light.
Number of times I've taken photos, and it's only when I've been editing the photos afterwards that I've seen, oh God, there's grass on that guy's head.
Yes, yeah. I think that's one of the downsides of photos, isn't it? I think you've got to really wait. You've got to have the self discipline to wait for it to dry and then really rigorously brush it off, with a fairly stiff brush, and then make sure you've got rid of all those little stray bits and pieces of grass.
And that's where an airbrush comes in handy.
How many bars, though? How many bars of pressure? What aperture? Just shitloads, really. Yeah.
Normal set pressure is about 1.8 bar.
1.8.
I just get the children to wander around with the fan and turn the fan faster. It's much easier.
Or just blow on them.
Or just blow on them. All right. Okay. Good. And then once you've got this, actually, maybe we jumped a step in terms of colorizing the the cork and the sand and all the base texture. I think you said, using cheapy paints to do it.
Yeah, if I'm using ground frame sealant, then all you need to do after that is just a dry brush.
Fine. So brown decorator's cork, really?
Yeah. If you're using white, I buy some browning, Daler-Rowney, Winsor Newton, Liquitex, whoever.
Yeah.
Add that in.
And it's just done.
Dry brush with a lighter colour to bring out any texture.
Okay. All right. So so it is for Mass Effect that this is one of the things, even prejudging our conversation next week, in which cheap is quite often better, and that allows you to save enough money to spend hundreds of pounds on 2 different electrostatic flock machines that work off mains electricity. It's a result. It's perfect. Textbook wargaming.
Another sort of basing, which I got from another blogger, which I have used and which I've been using with these Romans. Rather than using sort of glue, white PVA glue, standard household paint, emulsion paint, put that on the base, add the sand, it will stick it quite happily.
It will stick it, yeah.
If you want, you can mix in some PVA glue in for a bit of extra, but the paint will hold it just as well.
Wow. So you mean you end up with all your soldiers in pure brilliant white?
And the sand that you put on top will actually take up some of the pigment from the paint.
Okay. It actually sucks the pigment out of the paint. So you just need to get a household paint in the right brown.
So does that mean if you get some of the hairs, some of the grass, some of the flock, you can just say it's from the Dulux dog that was delivering the paint then?
Yeah. If your Dulux dog is bright green, Yeah, possibly whatever COVID drugs you're having there, Peter, might be you might have picked the wrong ones, I think. If you've
muted yourself, Peter.
Dogs. Yeah.
Oh, they're good.
Yeah.
This means war.
Okay, all right. Well, Peter, look, whilst you're on there now, what's your kind of go-to basing thing? Have you gone through an evolution of basing?
I've gone through a long evolution from literally nicking the sand from the kiddies' sandbox, which was quite amusing because they liked it. That was my first Roman army. To then I went after going to the first couple of competitions and seeing some of you with various complicated stuff, and I made the mistake of looking at someone's 28mm armies, and I went and bought a load of stuff which I've consequently not even opened. Because it's just like going, it's just too much hassle. I think the best thing I've done is to base an army in a go. So if I'm painting up an army, I'll try and base it all in one. So puts across that degree of consistency. After going on a couple of trips with you guys off to Europe and that, I think it was several beers between Simon, Tim, and Dave, and way too many beers. I've now lurched into do the base sand, do a couple of colours, brush, and stick on a few rocks, and then dab on a bit of grass and that. I like the sort of mixed up look of it. Doesn't look uniform, breaks it up a bit. It's just making sure nothing overwhelms it. So I'm quite pleased with the last ones I did, the Austrians. So it's come along a long way. And I'm just hoping something actually sticks on more than one competition, because that's the bit I usually have a problem with. But by the time I'm coming home, the sort of the bag I'm bringing it in rattles much more than it did when I left.
So have you ended up with armies that are based noticeably differently, so which makes it difficult to mix them or morph them together, or have your basings always been reasonably consistent?
No, I did the Flames, my first Flames of War one. I did those in a more consistent manner because of the nationalities. So, it's different compared to the Ancients. When I started doing the Ancients, the ADLG stuff, I went mostly a consistent one, apart from when I did some of the Arabic stuff and went into a sort of desert scheme. Because with the Ancients, a lot of it you can sort of mix and match in certain ones. So I wanted to be consistent from that. And then when I've come to the Napoleonics, I've just decided I bought some French ones. So they're going to stay with the sort of the green velvet that they've got, but with the Austrians and some of the others that have a bit more fun running over the hills and that. I'm having that sort of light rocky formation. But when we were doing the Saga stuff, I experimented a bit with the 28mm stuff, and oh man, I'm sure I've got a pack of those flowers and things somewhere that I just could not be bothered using.
Yeah.
I tried 3 or 4 times. They look great, but bloody hell, I'm sorry, but life's too short.
On that, I've got several packs. I think it was miniature.
Yeah.
The flowers. It's just like going
flowers and.
The flowers are so tempting, aren't they? But then you look at them, you go, is this quite sort of military enough? Has it got that military vibe, really? That's always the challenge.
I just, I try to aim for a bit more consistency. And but it's like you were saying about painting the army. But by the time you finish painting it, I just want to get it done now. Because, I must admit, most of my armies, normally when we're getting ready for competitions and that, the basing is dictated by how many days there are left until I have to actually leave for the competition. Defines about how detailed it is.
Right. Okay. So you base an army at a time then, and the basing evolves a little bit between armies still, even from that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Dave, what about you? You're a man with a knock fluffer, which you keep waving at us in a somewhat disconcerting way in many of these podcasts. Possibly you wave at other people that you Zoom call with as well, but that's probably in other parts of your private life. Talk us through the Dave basing world, or the Dave basing evolution as well.
When I started wargaming 10 years ago, you used to see armies which looked bloody awful. Just people stuck onto green cards and that. And I think basing's come one hell of a long way. I've evolved from just sticking a bit of sand onto. I really enjoy basing. I really do. So I've got a drawer full of stuff. So I've got one sort of like kitchen bag of rocks, ballast from modelling ballast, and I'll stick 2 or 3 rocks on a base sometimes together, and then wait for that to stick. Then I've got 2 grades of sand, a very fine sand, and then a less fine sand. I'll make sure there's glue all over the base, including onto the metal around the guy's shoes, because there's nothing worse on basing to see the metal base of the figure sticking through your sand and that.
Yeah.
And then, so I use a bit of rock sometimes. So if it's a, something like a Thracian guy, medium infantry going through terrain, there'll be a couple of rocks on there. Then I'll smear glue all around it. And then what I like to do is get enough of a texture on the base that dry brushing will work.
Okay.
I think the dry brushing is really important. And I've got cork as well, a little tiny, I used to use a lot of cork, fine cork, but a little bit of cork gives it the texture to take the dry brushing.
Do you put the cork into the basing material, or do you just stick it on top?
I just use some PVA glue, smear the PVA glue all around. So glue the figures to a 30 by 40 or 40 by 40, whatever. Then PVA glue all around the base. A little bit rock first, make sure that sticks on first before you put it in. I'll put some fine sand around the base, then a tiny little sprinkle of less fine sand onto that. And then finally a little bit of cork onto that. So you've got 3 textures,
right?
Around.
Okay.
Then,
just to avoid any confusion, when I was talking about decorator's cork, it was cork, CAULK.
Yeah.
They just put in cork.
Yeah,
that's true. Yep.
I've got like the Antenna Cities cork, which is £2.75, and that is a lifetime supply. I'd actually say if anybody wants some, I've got loads. But recently, when we went to Devisers a few years ago, there were some kids there called Gatehouse Gaming UK, and they're not cheap, but their sands are really, really nice, and they've got loads of different things. They're actually on eBay, but they charge a fortune for postage, unfortunately. But their stuff is really, really clever. So once it's all on there, stuck down, what I did is I've got one way of painting my bases. And I thought, what I'll do is I looked, so I went on, there was a Flames of War website where they had, and I was looking at, they had a load of techniques for basing. And I found one which was Libya, North Africa. And I thought, that's good. So I followed that as a basis, and I think it's really good. So I use English uniform Vallejo 921 or 141. And I use that, and I paint that on, I water it down a bit, but that goes on the whole base.
Wow, you actually use a Vallejo colour for your main base thing. Wow.
So I paint the Vallejo English uniform across the whole base. And then I dry brush desert yellow over that once it's dry. And then I use a final dry brush of buff, a very little amount of that. And just, I mean, it sounds like a lot of things, but one base coat and then 2 dry brushes really makes it ping. And I think it really makes a big difference. And I think I really enjoy doing it. I really do enjoy it.
It does. It kind of makes it just look. You achieve quite a lot of improvement for a relatively small amount of effort.
Good basing makes an army really good. So just putting a couple of rocks on the base first. What happens is the rocks stick out of the sand. Yeah. So you get that little effect of like there's some rocks underneath the earth that they're walking across.
Okay.
And flocking, I've just bought an electric flocking machine on eBay, which I'm going to give a go.
Right. Okay.
That's going to be a complete experiment, because the one thing that pisses me off now is the flock doesn't stand up. But I also use a bit, I've got sort of like a summer mix, which I put a bit of that on 2mm. I've bought some 4mm recently and then realised it's far, far too long for 15mm.
Yeah, no, that's enormous, isn't it? Too
long. And then a bit of a darker green Minotaur tufts on the ends occasionally.
So what's your theory on tufts then? Are you a tufts man, or have you been a convert to tufts?
I think they're fantastic. I think they're a real improvement. I think there's something, a bit of, flock first and then a few tufts glued into the flock in a different colour make it really pop. So you've got if you're going to do 3 dry brushes on the base of the sand and cork and things, and then you put 2 colours of, a light, I use a light green summer mix of flock, a little bit of that on it, and then some darker green tufts into that, and that makes them really pop, I think.
But the secret is just to getting a variety of different colours and textures there then.
Yeah, exactly.
On a solid base. Okay.
Yeah. So you're saying that they're about 4mm being too long for 15mm figures. Straight up, right? On a battlefield, maybe. But if a lot of it's sort of flattened down, not so bad. I think 4mm is what, 40 centimeters, 16 inches. If it's summer, sort of spring, late autumn, if it's a hayfield, that's actually fairly short.
I think if I can get this new,
but it has the effect during the lower legs for figures, so that is why we think it's too. It looks.
There's also a difference between what's realistic and what people expect to see.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the whole thing about what colour do you paint elephants, isn't it?
4mm flock to stand up with these electric static things, it will look really good. But
what sort of electrostatic was it you got? Is it sort of the fly swatter converter?
Yeah, this sort of like T-sieve with a as you say, a crocodile thing. So I'm sure I'm going to electrocute loads of times. Yeah. I've got 10 sitting here ready. So my idea.
What I would suggest if you're using that, I straighten out a paper clip.
Yeah.
Put that in the crocodile clip, and so that the crocodile clip isn't directly on there.
Well, I've been.
Dave, please take care. I don't want to have to write another eulogy.
No.
Dave, you are so going to zap yourself. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, you will get zapped. I got zapped plenty of times when I was using for Civ, and
wow,
it's normally just a short zap, and you let go of the Civ, and the static grass flies everywhere.
So we're going to see your hair sticking up on the next podcast, then, Dave.
Not much hair left.
No, that would be an achievement, wouldn't we? I think
I've been watching some YouTube tutorials with kids who, war hamster kids who smear the glue on, and then they stick the electrodes into the glue.
Yeah,
they reckon that works.
You don't actually need to.
Don't try it when you're in the bath.
You don't need to. It needs to be sort of down at about the level of the base.
Yeah, well, what I'm thinking of, I've got a biscuit tin, and I'm hoping if I put my war base...
No, don't do that.
No.
Don't do that.
Pour a bit of water in and get a metal tin.
A baking sheet.
Get some rubber gloves.
No, he must have rubber gloves already, surely.
I mean, rubber boots, I mean.
No, get a baking sheet, put your figures onto that.
Yeah, okay.
Rather than a biscuit tin.
Well, I just bought some
bacon. Otherwise, you'll be
electrocuted.
Large over a much bigger area. Much bigger, much better.
You end up flocking most of your living room then, quite possibly.
The Great British Bake Off.
The Great British Bake Off, yes, and your biscuits. It's biscuit tin week.
And in a pocket of salted water.
That's be it.
Two tonight for Andy.
That could be the one. All right.
War.
Let's go around the houses. Let's go around the houses a little bit more then. Simon, what about you? What's your world of basing? Because you've got all sorts of different eras and different armies and things like that, and you've imported stuff from Australia. Is it like a thing that you look back on and go, damn, I wish I'd worked out a proper way to start with, or are you not too fussed? Is it different horses for courses?
Oh no, I definitely have rebased a few of my original armies, or the ones I brought over. I used to be the standard historical wargamer, cheap as. I used to make my own bases by cutting out cardboard.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yes, they look like I cut out cardboard. So it might have been 40 mil wide, it might have been 38, 44. Yep. So giving up and just investing, basically giving money to war bases or Pendragon for MDF bases, godsend, well worth the money. But I've become a convert of the Dave Saunders or Flames of War style of simple basing. So again, using lots of PVA glue. And I use, rather than using sand, because I tried using sand a few times, failed miserably. It looks like I've got my miniatures in beach sand. Right. I've purchased some big tubs of train ballast for HO scale model trains.
Okay.
You can buy it's a brand called Woodland Scenics.
Yeah.
You can buy this 1 litre jar of it, and it's quite a nice consistency. It soaks up paint really well, and you can dry brush it, and also adds no weight to the model. So for my skill of painting, that's come up quite nicely. So I do the Vallejo style English uniform brown buff and the desert yellow. Yep. With I use cork. Quite often use cork. Larger pieces of cork for stones and things like that. So I've got some real stones, but also cork. Make it, dry brush up.
Do you paint the cork, or do you put it on after you've done the painting of the bases?
I glue it all, and then once it's glued down on the base, then I paint it up. So
okay.
I try to use it to cover up the base plates of the miniature, the footstand, or whatever.
Yep.
And I've tried flocking using the loose grass tufts or things like that. Horrible disaster. I realise I'm not particularly good at it, so I just buy the grass tufts and just add different sizes and different colours to give if you look at it carefully, you go, doesn't look too good. But at 3 foot, you look down and go, yep. It's a whole mixture of different grasses on miniatures. It looks, it comes up quite nicely. So, and I've used that same consistent style now on all my eras from Renaissance backwards. They're pretty much all consistent because it's effective, it's easy, and I can do it time and time again.
Yeah. Okay. So you just got proper production line, solid. You know what colours you're using. Do you dry brush it once you've painted it? Yeah. Yep.
I'll dry brush it as well. And I used to do different colours for different eras. Like I know some people have for their biblical that have like a more sandy type of colour, and then medieval is more dark, like more muddy. I just go the consistency across the board because it means I can morph my armies quite easy. So like my Chinese army, we've got chariots, they've got Renaissance guns in it. So now it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's the generic Chinese.
Around within reason.
Okay, all right.
And Libyan desert.
The Libyan desert. Yeah, you're doing the Libyan desert anyway, and that's not changed much from the Second World War to whenever.
Exactly. Libyan desert works for Romans, Egyptians, whatever.
Okay. Well, Adam, what about you? What do you base? You live near the beach, don't you? Do you just go down and get a bucket of sand and Bob's your uncle?
The sand from the beach is actually too nice and fine. So,
are you just trying to tell me you live somewhere really posh? Is that what it is?
Well, I think they actually import the sand and dump it on the beach to make it nice. So,
okay, all right,
it's nice soft sand. So, we don't I mean, I figured out a way of basing that I liked about 15 years ago. And basically everything gets based like that. I'm shocked to hear that different sands used for 15 and 28 mil. I'm shocked to hear there are different grades of sand that you can put on. I just use, apart from Malifaux figures, I've done differently because I bought resin bases at cobblestones and I figured out a way of doing cobblestones and they all look the same. But I do, similar to most people, it's almost like a modern war game standard. I used to love my paint it green and then glue some flop on top when I was a young lad, but the world's moved on. And I go with wood filler, as long as it's not hard because there are too many bases all sort of like mixing up and I can't get in the middle. If it's like that, I just don't put wood filler on. Right. Then I glue sand on top with PVA. The sand I use is builder's sand. It's about £3 a bag from B&Q. And by a bag, I mean
a bag.
25 kilo bag, isn't it?
Sorry?
About a 25 kilo bag?
It's big. I don't know, but it was heavy carrying it home.
Yeah.
I actually add into that different textures. So I put I've got, I don't know where or how or why I've got them, but it's like little stones. I think it's railway modelling track ballast or something.
Yep.
So I throw a load of them in and some other stuff that I've got lying around. I throw in them to make it a little bit different sizes. I glue that on with PVA.
Mm-hmm.
I then paint that with emulsion.
Yeah.
The emulsion I use is the tester pots.
Yes, yeah.
I buy the tester pots, and about 15 years ago, I bought about 5 tubes. I bought a few different ones and decided what colour I'd like, and I bought about 5 tubes of the tester pots of, I think it was Kenya Mid-Tone, Crown Kenya Mid-Tone, and I'm now on the last tube of that, so it lasts forever. It needs to be watered down quite a lot because it's very thick. And I just paint that on and the sand just sucks it in. And it looks nice. Then a vaguely heavy dry brush with green, a very light dry brush with white, and then sort of like tufts and different patches of static grass.
Right.
Sort of like at random to create a random sort of pattern to hide the bases. And all my figures have been based like that for quite a long time, so they're all interchangeable. And they look okay. I mean, the thing about bases is when you look at a table, you actually see the base more than you see the figure from the angle you're looking at.
Definitely.
So it's got to look kind of coherent, and that's all I do. And the concept of different sized static grass, different grains of sand is, again, other people's basing is going to look better than mine, but it's a very quick way of basing that I am happy with the effects it gives for the army.
Okay.
So that kind of works for me.
So you're on with emulsion. All right. Andy, what about you? You're cooking stuff up in your kitchen on the Zoom call as we speak, is there a pot of basing material bubbling away on the stove behind you, or what's the
there's no
thing
smoke
for
coming
basing?
out, so the answer is probably no.
Probably
I
not.
use stuff called coat down brushscape. It's described as sandy brown, but it's more a kind of a mid-dark brown. But this stuff gives it texture. What I do is I stick the figures on the MDF base, and then I put this stuff in, and it solidly, it builds up the physical height of it, and it's got kind of a bit bumpy and knobbly, so it creates a kind of a textured effect. Leave that to dry, probably best overnight. And then I dry brush it bone color or linen or something similar. Then I give it another dry brush of grey. And then after that, I put dabs of white glue on it and then sprinkle some flock on it. And that's it. And, you know, if I want kind of deserty type stuff, I'll put less grass on it or probably none at all. And if I want European one, I'll put a bit more grass on it. But it'll have a varied kind of a rough patch, bits of grass mix type of stuff on it. And that tends to be how I do most of my basing these days.
And how many armies will you get through one of those coat to arms, you know, buckets of whatever it is with?
Quite a few. I mean, I've actually I bought one at the beginning of lockdown and I've not finished it yet, and I've painted about 400 figures of different scales. So
wow, okay,
yeah, it's
that
quite
through.
Yeah, you only need a small amount on each individual base.
Yeah, true. All right,
but
okay.
So it's a fairly simple process, but it looks you know, I don't obsess over the quality of the bases, but they look nice and they look painted and coloured and a bit kind of not pure green, solid green. And you know, I'm a great believer of the fact of a bit of nice painting and a couple of flags can hide a multitude of painting sins.
Yeah, no, I think that's the case as well. Yeah, well, I think certainly from my point of view, I've ended up with sort of two. I've got a legacy basing and a more recent basing that I started doing with some Saga stuff that's now kind of started to eat into the rest of mine, and they do sort of meet in the middle-ish, but I'm in that period in which I've got half of my stuff with one style of basing and half with the other, and it is a little bit irritating. So my old style basing was, you know, building up the base initially with a filler. I was using polyfiller wood filler in a really light color, kind of almost like this, that kind of gives you a yellowy, slightly textured piece anyway, as long as you don't smooth it over too much. And I actually found that color was a really good match for miniature paint sand. So you could build up the texture on the actual base itself with the polyfiller light wood filler, and then you only had to paint around the edge of it with sand. So there was no painting over the top, and occasionally I would push into it little bits of proper sand, or again, like everybody else, some model railway ballast, just to give it a bit of slightly different texture. And then when that was dry, just dry brushed the lot with initially a kind of a reddy brown and then a real much paler brown, so that there was always two tones of dry brush on it, and then do patches of initially flock, and then I moved many years ago onto static grass, the normal sort of 2 to 3 mil. But I've never really gone down the route of even considering the electrostatic malarkey, partly because it just sounds really bloody complicated. But
it's not complicated.
I'm sure it's not complicated. Okay, it sounds more work than I can be asked to do, and which is probably more accurate way of doing it. And I can justify it to myself in that the grass is trampled down, possibly. So that's the answer. So I've got patches of grass on it. I think a few years ago I got sold on the idea of grass tufts and started adding some of those to particularly the bigger scale figures to get a real mix of them. Because just having different grass tufts, I think it was one of the AGLG players from up north sells quite a lot on eBay if he's still doing that. So adding grass tufts, and I have got, like everybody else, a set of flowers that I bought thinking that would be great to add some colour, and then I now look at them and go, I don't know, add like that. That's too bloody colourful. That's a bit weird. Yeah, the flowers is a bit weird. But then since then, a few years ago, I started doing a completely different one, which was, if the figure's base isn't that big, I will just do PVA glue and sand. If the figure base is bigger, I will actually build it up with wood filler and then do PVA glue and sand. So, and again, builder's sand textbook. It just has a range of little different sizes of stuff naturally in it. I sort of filter out some of the really bigger stones, particularly on 15mm ones, but just sort of pick them off. But instead of painting it, I stain it with a thing called Rustin's wood stain for interior and exterior use. And I use a dark oak. So it literally is for wood stain. It's for staining untreated wood furniture and just giving it a completely different color. And you just dunk your paintbrush in it and dab it onto the base with the sand, and the sand can still the glue can be wet or it can be dry. It doesn't make any difference. And sort of osmosis just takes this thing all the way through the sand and gives it a really consistent color. And then I dry brush the sand with a pale gray and I think it's skeleton bone or bleach bone, one of those two colors, to give them a really, really consistent color. And I've used that on 28mm, on 28mm single base, on 15s. I've even used it on 6mm tanks and stuff like that. It's just exactly the same sand, exactly the same dry brush, and the doing it with the stain just seems a lot easier than painting over sand. You're not watering stuff down, you're just getting it out the tin and plonking it on. And you can do one or two. If you do more stain, it gets a darker color. And then patches of dry brush on, patches of static brush.
Because using emulsion, it sort of soaks in. But before doing the sand, I use the unwatered down emulsion to actually paint the figure base.
Right, okay.
How does a stain deal with figure base?
It just stains the sand, and it will stain the MDF if you're using MDF bases as well.
No, I mean the metal or plastic base of the figure.
Oh, sorry, the figure base. No, it doesn't. It doesn't do that. It doesn't colour it at all. I end up two things, I guess. So either I end up painting that like a brown, or I build up over it with some. If I build the polyfiller up to level with it, I put sand over it. Mm-hmm. Quite often, I end up using the static grass around the feet of the figures where it's really obvious there's a base. So sometimes when I just can't be bothered to build up the bases to, if there's just too much, you think these figures I just want to get them done. I glue the sand on, and you can see there's kind of raised mounds around the feet of the figures, but which would be really obvious if it's just the sand and the dry brush. But that tends to be where I stick all the static grass. So the grass will just hide it. But yeah, so it doesn't color metal, but it really, really stains sand to a really, it's bizarre. You'd think sand would be sand colored, but it's not a consistent color and it's a bit light. But using this stain, you suddenly make all of the sand a consistent darker color, and then you dry brush it to make it lighter, which is starting one place and then working to get back there again. But and that I've really, really liked, and again moved to MDF bases just because they're kind of neat. And I'm not sure it really matters if a base is 39mm or 41mm, or I'm not quite sure the accuracy of the bases is wildly important in most of the games we play, or any of the games we play really.
I like having
it's just the fact they do fit together, and it sort of fits that OCD thing.
Plus, you can get the bases that have already got the metal underneath for the magnets. The magnets to make it a lot easier when you're travelling around with that.
Bases,
Yeah, no, well,
also cheap enough to not make me wince, because I've started using them, and for a long time it's like, no, I'm going to use it. And we say cardboard; it's how I use our mounting card. It's like
exactly, proper stuff,
decent material, but the MDF is just easier and it's cheap enough to make me go, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it's £3, £2, £1.80.
The MDF is less likely to warp than the mounting board, and
Well, no, I think that's a post hoc justification because I've 30 years.
Interject with my scientist hat on. Because earlier you said that Rustin's wood stain seeps through by osmosis. No, it doesn't. Capillary action. Osmosis, it has to cross a membrane.
Right. So it's what is it called? What's the science? Capillary action. Capillary action. Of course it is. Yes, absolutely right. So, the great thing is I get a bit of science. I get a bit of science. Yeah, I get a good one. God, Andy, where are you when I need you? There's a bit of science there as well. So, but I'm in the middle of having 2 different basing schemes, and I've ended up with my biblical troops on the new scheme, and then all my sort of classical era troops on the other one. And it's just like there's this thing with the mini Persians who kind of sit in both camps. That it's just means I'm going to have to buy some more figures and base them both differently. Because obviously using one army with 2 different sets of basing, and it's utterly unacceptable when the option is buying more figures from a museum in their sale in January. So that I think takes us round the full set of people in terms of our discussion on basing.
This means war.
So then we've delved deep into the world of static grass and basing, and I think in the intervening few minutes, I think Dave hasn't yet electrocuted himself, but it's probably by next week's episode we might be seeing a man with static hair sticking up. If
not arrived yet, so I think it's stuck in the post office. They claim they came and tried to knock on my door.
Yeah. It's the static electricity. It's stuck to someone's sweater, isn't it? Yeah. But look, in
the postman.
If that shocking story isn't enough for you, it's time for us all to be shocked by the arrival of Andy's quiz music.
Comment les voir? Question. Le trou est sans fond? Question. La légende le dit? Question. Elle dit aussi? Question. C'est une maladie? Question.
It gets harder work every week, doesn't it?
We need to get exercise from somewhere.
Yeah, you got to do it. So then, c'est la vie, incroyable, and away we go. Andy, hit us with
2, right?
March 2. Hit us with last week's answers, and then give us a little pause so I can put the music in much more tidily, and then we'll go on with next week's questions.
Probably even with a French accent. Right. Last week, I asked you 3 questions on the theme, "Oh, what a lovely war," and they were about the First World War. The first question was, which Oscar-winning feature film featured the top-scoring Austrian submarine ace of the First World War?
The Hills Are Alive with
The Sound of U-Boats, possibly. It has to be that, because that's the film with the most sort of Germany people in it, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. Jörg van Trapp was the top German Austrian submarine ace.
Was he one of the children, or was he the dad?
The dad.
He was the dad. Okay.
Yeah. And there's actually a bit about him in a museum in a place called Kotor, which is in Montenegro. It's a lovely old fortified town, and they've got a maritime museum, and there's a section of naval history about the Austrian Navy and the Yugoslav Navy there.
Yugoslav Navy?
Yeah, some nice model destroyers from World War II and stuff. Right. Question 2. Which First World War fighter ace has a major sporting venue in France named after him?
On base, I don't know any other French stadia. I will guess Roland Garros.
That's it.
Bloody hell!
Wow. Yeah. Mr. Roland Garros.
Yeah, and he became famous partly because he was, when the Germans started, they had this thing called the Fokker Eindecker, which could shoot straight ahead, and that was a technological advantage for them. And the Allies couldn't, because basically they fired the machine gun through the front of their plane, it would shoot the propellers off. And Garros put what's called deflector plates on his propellers, which is basically steel bits so the bullets would bounce off. And that worked for a while, and then he was shot down. And then afterwards, the Allies worked out that if they made the engines fire the machine guns, which is what the Germans did, you could actually stop the bullets going through the propeller.
Yeah, you could synchronize it. No, there's a whole thing about that, the RAF Museum in Hendon, which might even be open again soon. Wow, that brings up. Okay.
Yeah. Right, and the question 3, Which German commander in 1918 did not surrender until he found out about the armistice from a captured newspaper?
Nope, not a Scooby. Not a Scooby.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
His name was Colonel Orletto Vorbeck, and he was in command of the troops in German East Africa. And when the colony was basically overrun in 1916, he kept going around with his troops and doing guerrilla warfare against the British and leading them a merry dance. And he attacked a Portuguese place in November 1918, captured some newspapers and found out the war was over. So then he just marched up to the local British base and say, apparently the war's over, here we are.
Is that another Zanzibar link? Have we actually, created consistency and something coming through? This wasn't in Zanzibar, was it? Do we need to
Zanzibar was actually off the coast of German East Africa at the time, which is Tanzania. And there was actually some naval action going on. There was a cruiser called the Königsberg. If you've ever seen the movie Shout at the Devil years ago about the German cruiser hiding in the river, that was based on the ship that did that.
Lee Marvin one?
Yes, Lee Marvin and I'll think of her name in a minute.
Sophia Loren?
No, Catherine Hepburn, I think it was.
Catherine Hepburn. Wow. Well,
the African Queen.
There's a huge amount of military history there for Paul in Zanzibar then, as we speak. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Comment les entendre? Question. Comment les voir? Question. Le trou est sans fond? Question. La légende le dit? Question. Elle dit aussi? Question. C'est une maladie? Question.
So this week's questions, Andy.
This week's theme is called Museum Pieces. Which foreign dictator's wooden leg is one of the exhibits in the Illinois State Military Museum, having been captured by an Illinois regiment during wartime?
Well, I don't know, but this has suddenly become my number one reason for wanting COVID to be over. To go to a Chicago Military Museum and look at wooden legs. Okay, fine.
And number two, which Napoleonic marshal, related to the heroine of a historic event commemorated in the famous folk song, has his baton as an exhibit in a museum in Armadale on the Isle of Skye?
The Isle of Skye, someone's baton. Fine, okay. That's
right.
That's
which
niche.
Union general, who was acquitted of killing his wife's lover by pleading temporary insanity, commanded a corps at Gettysburg and lost his leg, which is now an exhibit in the Smithsonian Museum?
Okay, so yes, there's so it's body parts strewn across the world then. And
obviously collected by Americans to put in museums.
Collected by museums. Okay, then. Well, look, on that bombshell, I think we will sit back and listen to that music.
Question. Comment les voir? Question. Le trou est sans fond? Question. La légende le dit? Question. Elle dit aussi? Question. C'est une maladie?
Okay, then. Well, look, we just found out, I think this very evening, about how lockdown may or may not change depending on where we live, and we are now none the wiser anyway. But I think that still means we've got another few weeks of not necessarily being able to go out. So very, very quickly to run around and say, what have you got, coming in the post? What have you got on the workbench, on the paint bench this week? And Adam, starting with you, what's your next 7 days looking like, soldier-wise?
Well, looks like some nations and dations, and to be honest though, it's like I just want to have a hot bath.
Yeah,
and perhaps a bit of a Assyrian relief before going to bed.
That's good. A little bit of Assyrian relief for you, Peter. You and your Assyrian relief. Now that you're locked at home.
Well, you got to have a good Assyrian relief. It's the way to go these days.
Yeah.
I'm going to march through the Bavarians, then transfer. While I'm on isolation, as to the app has told me, for the next 10 days. I've got some French to march into next. So I've got, I think it's going to be a Napoleonic couple of weeks.
Okay. All right. Simon, what about for you? Are you going to be waiting? Are you going to be doing anything before that stuff that you're not really going to buy from Lancashire Games arrives?
So, yeah, I'm currently working on more 28mm rats. So, yeah, I started to make a lot of cheese jokes. But, until the next models arrive, I think I'll be just focusing on these quite cute models and just having some fun.
Okay, yeah. In fact, that does remind me. Maybe next week, if it's good weather, I'll get on my bike and bring you over those American football rats. You can have them as wingers or whatever they are in Dragon Rampant. And Tamsin, what about you? You said you've got some MDF scatter terrain, and then you've got something else kind of in the pipeline.
MDF scatter terrain, and then before I go on to those cobblestone figures mentioned for the last couple of episodes.
Yes, the cobblestones are coming after some scatter. All right. Saunders, we know that you're going to be, faffing around with pipe cleaners and electricity, and possibly nothing could go wrong. So, what might be your last ever appearance on this podcast? What have you got planned for next week before you electrocute yourself?
Well, I'm going to learn to make bread.
What, with the scatter thing?
No, I watched Nigella Lawson last week, and she's making bread. She's got this easy recipe for making bread. So my plan for the next few days is to make bread.
So that's how you learn not to blow. That's how you learn not to blow your stuff up.
Back in March and April at the start.
Yeah, that's the sourdough. I've never used flour in my life apart from a rudimentary toad in the hole.
Well, I've heard it's very good for it's very good for basing. It's very good for basing if you get the fine enough grain.
But it was quite good fun explaining what toad in the hole was to Iñaki in Spain.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, that was a weird conversation. All right, so look, you're going to have something very unusual to report on next week, or possibly not.
All being well.
All being well. And Mr. Finkel, what about you? What's on the table this week for you?
More Thracians and Voynooks, basically, and I think that will keep me entertained till next week.
And I think for me, it's more finishing off a few odds and sods. I've got a few 28mm Ottoman generals just to finish off, and I think I will make a pretty big dent in these Arabs. I suspect there'll only be a couple of bases left to do by it, and like Adam, I think I'm hoping on good weather to get some spraying done outside, and I think I'm also waiting on a couple of deliveries that are 10mm tank related, and I will be dithering about.
About 20 different pots of paint so you can paint them properly, is that it?
No, I've just waited one big can of British Green and one big can of Dunkelgelb to come from Element Games. So once they're done, I think there will be 90% of the way there, and the other 23 colours can probably go whistle. So on that note, whilst we're whistling for colours and I'm waiting for static electricity, it's time to say thank you yet again for another entertaining, I believe, period of time. And goodbye and good luck for everybody in the next week of whatever the next lockdown phase actually looks like. Goodbye.
Bye.
There's some worrying steam coming out of the back of Dave's
Yeah, but I think we've got, in glue and paintbrushes, we sometimes said different things. I think we've all said about the same thing on that repeatedly.
When I stick glue on, then I use static glass.
Yeah, there is static glass, yeah.
That's very different.
Well, save the best till last. It's all. I don't just throw this shit together.
You really do surprise me.